Good afternoon, and welcome to all of you gathered here today. Approximately 200 of you will be joining us this afternoon, and countless others who are streaming online. Welcome to you all. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Laura Laughlin, and I am a senior here at Luther in the Master of Divinity program, just coming off of a year of internship. And I'm going to be your MC for today's program, so I'm happy to be with you. I've been invited to share a little bit about my call story, which is exciting for me to do. I am a PK, a pastor's kid, and so I grew up with the church being my second home. And my dad was the pastor, and my mom worked in youth ministry and is now on her internship, getting ready to be ordained next summer alongside me. So that will be pretty fun. But having grown up in the church, I have this memory of sitting in my dad's office when I was in high school, listening to him teach an adult education class one Sunday morning. And I thought to myself, I said, okay, yeah, I could do that. That would be good. But then as I got closer to going to college, I went to Wartburg College in Waverly, Iowa. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. No, I'm going to be an English teacher or maybe a journalist. So I was interested in those arenas, and I started classes, and it was about a month into my freshman year at Wartburg College, and I was in a couple journalism classes that I just could not stand. It just drove me nuts. And so we took a break during one of those classes, and I was going to go get a drink of water. And I walked down the hallway and passed a bulletin board that had some poster on it that said the word seminary. It was for some seminary, I can't remember what it was. But all I saw was the word seminary. And it was like the whole world stopped. My heart was beating really fast, and I couldn't breathe, and it was just very, very clear to me right then in the middle of a hallway. So I ran back to the classroom, and I sent a text message to my mom, my dad, and my brother. And I said, I think God's calling me to be a pastor. And within a minute, all three of them responded saying, it's about time you figured it out. So from there, I dropped the journalism, added religion to my majors, and didn't look back from there. And so when it came to figuring out where I was going to go to seminary, both my parents are graduates of Luther Sem, and this place has always had a soft spot in my heart. It's always felt like home. And so this is where I decided to come, and I am so beyond thankful that this is where I chose to be educated to be a leader of God's church. And having just come off of internship, I can tell you that the education I am receiving here alongside all of the students, my fellow colleagues, is phenomenal. And it is the gifts that you provide, the support that you give, that makes it all possible. And so we are gathered to honor you in this celebration today, and honor and say thank you on behalf of the Luther Seminary community. And for myself, on behalf of the entire student body, I can say that your support is what helps to inspire us as we get prepared to be sent out into God's church. So thank you very, very, very much for all of that you do for us. So I'm not the only one that you're going to hear from today. We have so many fabulous people, and my introduction for the next part of our program is from some alums that are going to be joining us from a video that they've recorded. It's a couple of alums, Eric Gronberg and Kendra Moan. Both graduated from Luther Seminary in 2005 with their Masters of Divinity. Eric's father, Carl, is a 1967 graduate as well. Eric is the lead pastor of Trinity Lutheran Church in Fort Worth, Texas, where Kendra also serves as the teaching pastor while she pursues her PhD studies in New Testament at Bright Divinity School, part of Texas Christian University. Kendra and Eric have 2 daughters and reside in the Foster Park neighborhood in Fort Worth. They are examples of how your investment translates into educating leaders who are truly leading in their community. So let's take a look.
Greetings and thank you to you, the donors of Luther Seminary. My name is Eric Gronberg, and I serve as lead pastor at Trinity Lutheran Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm a 2005 graduate of Luther Seminary, where I met and now I serve with my wife, Pastor Kendra Moe.
I serve Trinity Lutheran as its teaching pastor, and I'm also a PhD student at Bright Divinity School. We came to Texas 5 years ago. We had one daughter with us, and now we have another daughter, and we're awaiting our third child in November. So it's a busy time in our lives, but it's a good time of the year to give thanks.
And so we say thank you to you. When we were at seminary, both of us were recipients of support from donors like you. And that support enabled us, when we graduated from Luther, to go where the church needed to call us. We were open and able to go where God had in mind for us to serve our first calls.
Basically, the way I say it is that the support we received from Luther kept doors open rather than closing them. So that when we were called to Greater Milwaukee, we could say yes, and we could take the calls God had in mind for us. And then 5 years later, when God called us to PhD work, we were able to say yes again and make those decisions based on what we truly felt God wanted us to do, rather than what kind of payments we were going to need to make and what the impact that would have on our families.
And so 5 years ago, we were able to move from the greater Milwaukee city to Texas and take on the call of Trinity Lutheran, as well as Kendra engaging, as she said, in her PhD work, as well as I entered into a PhD program in leadership studies at Dallas Baptist University. And not only does your support help seminarians, but it also supports faculty. It was the faculty and staff of Luther that really engaged me in the conversation around leadership of the church and how important that was for the life of the church and for the mission of the church. And so I'm grateful not only for your support of seminarians, but also for the faculty who make that learning possible.
So thank you for keeping doors open. Thank you for making it possible for people to answer calls they didn't even know God was going to issue to them. Thanks for making it possible for people to say yes.
So we are grateful for you. We are also a part of you. Since graduating in 2005, Kendra and I have endeavored in whatever small way we can to join in being donors and supporters of Luther Seminary, and we hope as our family grows, as our life continues, we will be able to continue to be generous and to support the school that has meant so much to us.
So thank you for keeping doors open. Thank you for making it possible for the people who have been called by God to be able to say yes to whatever God has called them to be, even if it's never occurred to them before. You put them in a position to be able to do whatever God has asked them to do.
So we thank you. We join you in our support of Luther Seminary, and we hope that as we are able to grow in our giving, you will as well. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless the mission, the staff, the faculty, and you, the donors of Luther Seminary.
Thank you for helping my mom and dad. Thank you.
That was so cute. Those were their two little daughters at the end, so that said thank you. It's now time to get an update on Luther Seminary, and who better than our president to lead this discussion. A year ago, we introduced you to Robin Steinke for the first time. She has now been leading Luther Seminary for 14 months and is familiar to many. We've come to know her as witty, smart, financially astute, a great listener, a person of strong faith, and someone who is not afraid of change. We are thrilled that she is leading Luther Seminary. Please join me in welcoming President Robin Steinke.
It is my deep joy and delight to be with you today. One of the unexpected blessings of getting to be the president of Luther Seminary is I get to say thank you in a lot of different ways to a lot of different folks. And I want to say, first of all, I'm really grateful and thankful for the folks gathered in this room for one thing, and that is you all must be hard at work tapping your children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews on the shoulder saying, we think you ought to go to seminary. Because this fall semester, we've got about an overall 10% increase in our student population. Most of that is new Master of Divinity full-time students in residence. So I want to say thank you for sharing the word about Luther and for tapping your family and friends to say, come and think about the ministry. So that's the first thank you. The second thank you is thank you for sharing the story of Luther Seminary around the world. Because we've also learned that thanks to your gifts and your support of some of the free resources that we provide, like our Working Preacher and Enter the Bible and God Pause. If you are not a subscriber to God Pause, now's your chance. We are reaching millions of people around the world in those free resources, thanks to some funding from the Lilly Foundation. So I want to say thank you for that as well. There's a third area that I want to really express gratitude to you all for. And that is, I have been deeply humbled in this first year by the number of emails or just a note that would come to me from out of the blue, sometimes from folks I didn't even know. And they would say, Robin, you don't know us, but I want you to know that we're praying for you. We're praying for your students. We're really praying for your faculty. No, we want you to know that we're holding this whole enterprise of educating leaders for Christian communities. We're holding that in prayer, and we just want you to know. So I want to say thank you for holding us in prayer, for holding me in prayer, for holding our whole staff team and faculty in prayer, because it really makes a difference. It really matters. When I stepped into my first faculty meeting a year ago in September, I didn't tell them this, but I was scared to death. I mean, this is the Luther faculty after all. They are known around the world. And who am I to come and join these group of colleagues? Or when I was in my first staff meeting, and I went, oh my goodness, this is the Luther staff. These folks are phenomenal. And I got to be with them in the midst of all that. And then just last week, I met the Student Association was really wise. They said, we're going to give her a year before we invite her to meet with us. So last week, they invited me to meet with them. And I looked around that room and I thought, wow, what a privilege to be with this stunningly talented group of leaders. So I want to thank you for that. Well, they're not here on their own ability to fund their own theological education. And that's the next thing I want to say thank you for. Because without your vision and commitment to help fund and undergird the ministry for which you have been tapping your friends and family to come, for which you have been holding in prayer, you have also written and committed to funding that work so that we can raise up great students like Laura, wonderful, brilliant staff like we have sitting around the auditorium, brilliant faculty like Michael, from whom you'll hear in a moment. I want to say thank you for those gifts. But there's another group that I also want to express gratitude for, and it's our eschatology group. I had to use the word somehow. I don't get to use that word many times anymore. But it's the group of our friends and donors who are not only thinking deeply about sharing their young people with us, their prayers with us, their current gifts with us, but they also have a vision for God's future. And they say, you know what? We want to share a gift with Luther Seminary out of our own thinking and estate planning in the future. We call that our Heritage Society. Maybe we ought to call it our Eschatology Society, because it's about the future that breaks into our present. It's about a future promise that breaks into our way of being an institution today, that says you have believed and seen something in what it is to educate leaders in this place, that you are willing to make a commitment from the future that breaks into our present. And I'm going to introduce in a moment to you 3 couples who have done that, but I want to tell you what they're getting. So I want our 3 couples to close your ears so it'll be a surprise, but I want to tell everyone else. We have this wonderful kind of marble statue of the Nativity. And you think, well, that would be a great Advent gift. Why do we share that gift in September? Why? And again, I think it's because it's the kind of gift that comes from the future and breaks into our present. This way that you all who are part of the Heritage Society are saying, we think God is up to something, and God has touched our heart and made it possible in our own planning to include a gift in the present. So I want to introduce to you 3 very special couples. I want to first call up Ken and Rosalie Grosch. Ken and Rosalie, where are you? Come on up. While they're coming up, I want to tell you just a little bit about them. They're members of Incarnation Lutheran Church in Arden Hills. Come right here. They were former missionaries in Papua New Guinea. Come on up. They got to see you in the back, so I want you up here with me. Yes, indeed. Missionaries in Ethiopia and Papua New Guinea. Ken was called as the first full-time director of Global Health Ministries, and Rosalie is a published writer and speaker. Thank you for including Luther in your plans for the future, because that breaks into our present. So on behalf of all of us, I want to share this with you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Rosalie, thank you so much. Ron and Jewel Goldberg. Ron and Jewel, where are you? Don't be shy. You're not in the room. All right, I'll come back to you. Greg and Cheryl Meyer. Greg, Cheryl, where are you? Yes, please, come up, come up. Greg and Cheryl, both graduates at Gustavus, active members of Lord of Life in Maple Grove, where they serve on the outreach committee. One of the great things that I learned about Cheryl and Greg is their active participation in our Lay School of Theology. So they are deeply involved in what some of our faculty are teaching, and what a wonderful testimony. So I want to say thank you to both of you for, again, bringing the future into the present in this wonderful and generous way. So thank you very much. Cheryl, thank you. Greg, thank you. Let's get a picture. Now, if Ron and Jewel are not here or had to depart, I want to just tell you a couple things about them, and we'll find another time. They're members of Desert Hills Lutheran Church in Green Valley, and also a church in New Richmond, Wisconsin. And Ron was a pastor in Northfield, Minnesota, a place not unknown to us. So we are deeply grateful. And will you join me in thanking these 3 couples for this wonderful gift? It's my deep delight and privilege to introduce our next speaker, Bishop Emeritus Peter Rogness. Now, I have to tell you, I knew about Peter long before I actually knew Peter. I had heard about this bishop who had been a bishop in Milwaukee, and then kind of termed out, and then he was elected bishop in another synod, and I thought, gosh, not just a glutton for punishment, but that's amazing to do all of that. So when I was asked to introduce him, I thought, well, now where would I find a great introduction for Peter Rogness? So I thought, well, I'll turn to his father's book called Across the Years. Alvin Rogness, one of my predecessors here as president of Luther Seminary, also an Augustana College graduate, as Peter is. And I thought, I wonder what his father had to say about Peter. Well, let me share with you. First, Al said, with regard to Peter, he had no abnormalities. He was uneventfully exemplary. Very good. I'm just really glad my parents didn't write a book about my childhood. But in the end, Alvin states something that I think bears witness to the sort of humble servant leader that has marked Peter's ministry his whole life. The stack of honorary degrees, the publications, the boards on which he has served in the name of this church and this seminary are far too numerous to mention. Here's what his dad says that I think really captures the kind of humble servant leader from whom you are about to hear. He writes, I believe he, Peter, will always remember that men are not rivals to be overcome, but brothers to be helped. I think your ministry, Peter, has been one where you try to help people see the way in which they can be of service to one another. And your ministry and leadership certainly has marked that. The final word of introduction is we asked Peter to say, what should we say about you? And he said, well, she could just say this. Peter grew up in the shadow of this place because his dad worked here. He graduated from here, served in Milwaukee, and then here, and then now lives in the very same city with Jerry, his best part. That's the kind of humble servant leader that we have in our midst. Will you join me in welcoming Peter to the podium?
I really should find a reason to stop and sit down, because after an introduction like that, there's sort of nowhere to go but down. Thank you for that. I was a little surprised when I saw what book she was reading from. That was never published. Those were some writings about Dad's life and history and family, as you heard, that we found in his office. We didn't know that he had been writing that, but stuck away in his office after he died. We found these writings, chapter on each of his parish assignments, a couple chapters on growing up and extended family, and a chapter on each of the kids. It was great fun. The kind of writing all of us ought to do to leave for the generations that come. There were some other parts that she could have pulled out, but Robin was very kind, so I'm glad. I'm glad you used those. I was invited when Kathy Malotki called me and invited me to be part of this. I was glad to say yes. This place is in my blood. And she said, just talk a bit about, I said, what am I supposed to talk about? Well, I'm doing two parts of it. I preached later, but for this part, she said, just talk about why you support the seminary. That's who's gathered here, is people who support the seminary. And I thought, well, I can do that. And then I noticed in one of the little briefings for the program for today, it said Peter Rogness, son, alum, and bishop, those three things. And I thought, there are three good reasons. Number one, I'm an alum. I think, and as most of us do, I think we support those institutions and those places that have shaped us into who we are. So I support Luther Seminary. It's a big part of who I am because of the shaping, the teaching, the community. It's a big part of who I am. Second, as bishop, and I want to say a little about this. Robin said, bishop in two places, he must be a glutton for punishment. I get that a lot, you know, oh, terrible, it must be an awful thing to be a bishop. You're the ones that people call when they're mad about something, or when they're fighting, or when they've got a complaint. it all lands in your office, and there's truth in that. But there's also the mantra that I would say every time I had a chance was that a bishop, unlike most people, has an uncommon ability to see the breadth of the church's life because of what we get involved in. And if everybody in the church could see the breadth of the church's life and ministry as we do, we'd have no sarcasm or people down in the mouth or leaving disillusioned, because there's magnificent ministry happening in venues beyond what any one of us can know by ourselves. It's a magnificent thing to be part of this body of Christ and to be part of an institution like Luther Seminary that shapes the people who are critical to the church's life and growth. So I recognize that there is little point in seeking to have a strong and healthy church unless we are prepared to do what needs to be done to train strong and healthy leaders, as Luther Seminary does. So that's why I support Luther Seminary. The third, I'm also a son, and that's the shortest answer. If I didn't, somewhere beyond the veil of this life, I'm going to meet up again with Dad, and I wouldn't want to face him if I had somehow given short shrift to his school in this place. Well, so I echo the thanks that Laura and that Robin and everyone has shared, and those are some of the reasons. But I want to say something before I'm done that goes a little bit deeper on the importance of you people as donors. I want to start with two lessons that I learned real early about the church, two little ditties. One, I suppose, I learned in preschool or in little Sunday school or something, and I bet you all of you did too, and you can do it with me, right? You remember this? This is the church, and this is the steeple, and open the doors and see all the people, huh? All the people. Learned that early. So this was the church, and it had a steeple and it had a lot of people in it. But then I learned a song that was sort of the counterpoint to that doesn't start with the building. The little hymn that says, "I am the church, you are the church." If I could sing this, I would, but I'll spare you. I am the church, you are the church, we are the church together. All who follow Jesus all around the world. Yes, we're the church together. And then the chorus, or the first verse says, the church is not a building. The church is not a steeple. The church is not a resting place. The church is the people. That's where the church is. Now hold that thought for a minute. Let's talk about this part of the church, the seminary. 60 years ago, Dad came. 1955 was when he started, and we moved into what was then the president's house. I was 9 years old. You can do the math. Actually, that does me well. I'm actually 70. That only makes for 60. Anyway. So he came here in 1955. The seminary charged no tuition. As I recall, I don't think there was even a business office here. The operation of the church was handled at 422 South 5th Street, church headquarters. This was back even pre-ALC days. This was Evangelical Lutheran Church, not in America, just ELC. And it was the only seminary the church had. And the seminary was fully supported by the church because that's what the church did. Inherent in it started new congregations. It sent missionaries overseas, and it trained its leaders for its future. That's what the church did back then. Soon after Dad's arrival, I suppose a shift was in place even at the time, but after his arrival, tuition began. A business office was established. Donors became more and more an important part of what was going on, and a shift began that has gone on for decades, for over half a century, where the denominational support of the seminary has continued to decline, tuition has continued to increase, and now the mainstay of how the church produces its leaders are the donors. That's how the church is doing it now. And that trend has happened not because denominations somewhere along the line decided that seminaries weren't important anymore. It didn't happen because of merger issues, it just did. It was a cultural trend. Back in the 50s, 60s, it was typical for a congregation to send 20% of its budget or better to the work of the mission beyond the congregation. That's what the church did. It was called mission, and the seminary was part of that. Now, in most places, that's 5% or less. The church doesn't do mission in that way anywhere. But here's the word. Here's my point, and the word that I want you to hear most clearly in all of this. This is not a sign that somehow the church cares less about what goes on here. It's simply a sign that over this span of history, the way the church moves money and does mission has shifted. Remember the sign, the song? Church isn't a building or a steeple. The church is the people, you. And it's you, the church, that are the rock-solid foundation of the preparation of leaders for this church's ministry in the future. The fact is, God still uses the body of Christ, but in a different way than before. And you who have claimed this part of the life of the body of Christ as significant and important and life-giving in your own life and for the life of the world, you are at the core of what makes this seminary still a gift to the people of God and a gift to the whole world in raising up leaders. So I join all these others in thanking you for your generosity. Thanks.
It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Michael Chan is in his third year as assistant professor of Old Testament, where he teaches Scripture and its witnesses, Daniel and Jeremiah. He is also a 2009 Luther Seminary graduate, and I can say that the impact that Dr. Chan has had on this campus and how beloved he is by the faculty, students, and staff is immeasurable. It's astounding what he's done to this place, and it's my pleasure to introduce him to you today. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Michael Chan.
Thanks, that's really generous, Laura. I teach Hebrew Bible, so let me begin there, and if Jim Limburg is out there, you're going to like this one. From the book of Exodus, "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments." What a way to start. So the Hebrew Bible recognizes that the consequences of one generation's actions, whether they are righteous or evil, will wash up onto the shores of the next generation. It recognizes that what we do today actually matters. As Robin talked about how the future is breaking into the present. When I walk around Luther Seminary, I see the future in the past coming together. And I love being surrounded by all of these plants because recently I've been asking myself this question. As I walk around campus, I wonder, who planted the seed for that? So you walk into a building like this and you say, who planted the seed for that? Or I look at some of my colleagues, many of whom graduated from here, and I say, who planted the seed for her? Or who planted the seed for him? Who planted these seeds that we now are surrounded by, these incredible trees, these incredible plants that we are now surrounded by? This summer, my wife and I decided that we would start our first garden, a vegetable garden. And since we just had a new daughter in December, whose name is Eden, we appropriately titled it the Garden of Eden. And Even now, we're starting to see some of these plants bud up and bear fruit. And it's the planting of a garden it's one of these processes where you plant, water, wait. Plant, water, wait. Plant, water, and the cycle goes on and on and on. And then finally, and all of this life is happening in hidden ways that you don't ever see until finally you get this little bit of a breakthrough. And finally, you get to taste the fruits of your labor. Those of you who give in terms of your prayer, in terms of your time, and in terms of your resources, also plant seeds. Those seeds sometimes take generations to emerge. And that's why it's been so fun for me in leading up to this event to walk around this campus and say, who planted these seeds? I encourage you to do the very same thing. That whenever you are on this campus, ask that question. Who planted those seeds? When were they planted? We have some oak trees in our yard that are generations old. They're ancient. And I just wonder, we get to enjoy their incredible shade and their beauty, but who planted that seed? Where are the oaks that you have planted maybe last year, maybe 10 years ago? Where will those spring up? Where will that shade be cast over this place and over this world? This weekend gives us the opportunity to thank you for sharing the Hebrew Bible's vision of transgenerational partnership in God's mission for the world. I want to express gratitude not only as a faculty member, but also as a former recipient of the Richard Wallace Scholarship when I was a student here, which seeks to honor the diversity of God's people and ministry in the world. Through all of you, God has shown steadfast love and kindness and compassion through your hands, through your prayers, through your presence here, and through your gifts. Thank you for your partnership with us in educating leaders for Christian communities called and sent by the Holy Spirit to witness to salvation through Jesus Christ and to serve in God's world. Thank you.
Before I add a final word of thanks, I want to just double check. Ron and Jewel Goldberg, are you in the house? Have you arrived? Please come forward. You didn't know this was going to be, it's not a test. Don't worry. We want to present something to you. Come on up. Come on up. As part of our newest Heritage Society members, please come forward. Come forward. They're members of Desert Hills Lutheran Church in Green Valley, Arizona, and their home church in Richmond, Wisconsin. And Ron's a member of the class of 1960. And his first call was a congregation in Northfield, Minnesota. So we want to thank you for being part of the Heritage Society, for helping the future break into the present in new ways. So on behalf of all of us, we want to say thank you. And this is for you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And finally, thanks to all of you. And I also have to say, Morva Klein, our musician, you are wonderful. Thanks for leading our prelude. Thank you. And a graduate of 2001. A Luther graduate, that's great, 2001. So thank you for helping us see the beauty of God in song and in music. We appreciate that. So I invite you now, you're probably going to give us final instructions, so go ahead. Thank you.
And thank you all. We can't say it enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for all that you've done, for joining together as a community today to celebrate the difference that your gifts truly make in the life of the seminary and the church. We're going to sing a hymn in just a little bit, but I want to offer one note of direction. After our closing hymn, we encourage you to engage with one of our 3 panels that will be taking place following this program. There will be a student panel that will be downstairs in the lecture hall downstairs. So if you just go out here and go down the stairs, you'll see it right there on your left. This is the student panel. There will be a faculty panel in dining room C. And there will be a program panel in the auxiliary dining room. This is just off of the entrance to the eatery. So we invite you to join us for that. Please stand and join together in singing our hymn, number 593 in the ELW.